Welcome to Conversations with Sarah. I'm Sarah Redden, therapeutic coach of SRTT, and today I'm joined by Jenny Richardson, a relationship and dating coach. Welcome, Jenny. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're going to have a bit of a chat about relationships, boundaries, self-care, and you're going to share a bit of your expertise with us today. So the first thing that I kind of like to ask is, what is a relationship and dating coach?
Well, it's basically I help people in the dating stages with a little bit of strategy, and which is quite simple to teach really, and then a lot of mindset stuff that goes with dating. But I also do the coaching around those initial stages of a relationship in the first year or so, when you're establishing what your relationship is, negotiating boundaries around that, and all that anxiety I think that comes up. If you can remember the last time you were first in a relationship, all that anxiety that comes up around getting to know somebody new, and it feels quite vulnerable. So that's the kind of stuff that I cover with people when I work with them.
Perfect, thank you. And how did you become a dating coach?
Well, I was married in my early 20s. I met my husband at university, and he sadly passed away 5 years ago. And I wasn't expecting to be dating again. I don't think anybody is, are you? When you get married, I'm not having to date again. And it was a good, 20 years since I dated. So a lot has changed in that time. After my husband died, I retrained to be a coach. I'd got coaching myself in those kind of early stages of grieving and found it really helpful. So it kind of, I guess, ignited a bit of a fire in me to want to train up and help other people, but also to have something for myself, because my kids were just transitioning into secondary school when all of this was happening, and they're getting more independent, and I wanted something for me, kind of a purpose. So I retrained as a coach, and then as I was going into dating myself and those early stages of a new relationship, I realized that the coaching works very well with that, and how important looking after yourself when you're dating, how important that is, because I think you can lose yourself a little bit in it, and you can take things very personally, and that isn't helpful when you're trying to find a new relationship, because obviously in dating you are going to get some ups and downs within that. You get rejected sometimes, people don't always behave very well online, and I think it's important first and foremost to protect yourself when you're going into that, and I think that's what I found really helpful when I was doing it.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So I was kind of single and dating in my early 30s, and online dating seems to be the way to go, doesn't it? And there is some interesting experiences that I had navigating through this space. And I'm someone that kind of had quite an idea of like safety and boundaries and all of that stuff. And even then, there were times that I was like, oh, okay, people do this now. Is this really what it's like? So one of the questions that I would really like to know is, have you got like safety advice for people that are using online dating?
Well, I think the online apps, certainly the ones that I've used, they are quite good now at the safety message. So just thinking in terms of don't give away too much personal information, i.e. like where you live, where your kids go to school, all of that kind of stuff. Don't give that away too early on. I think they do say keep the conversations on the app for a little while until you get to know them a little bit. But then also when you move it over to WhatsApp or Messenger or however you want to do it, there are always mechanisms within that you can block people or delete them or whatever. If there's something going on that you're not comfortable with, then do that. You've got to kind of protect your own headspace a little bit with that. And I think technology has come on in the last few years. It's not perfect, but I think it has come on. And I think all those safety messages that we would give our kids about, the people that you're conversing with, most people are who they say they are, but you can never be sure, because if it's all been done via text, you've just got to be a bit mindful of that. So I think obviously when you're meeting for the first time, make sure it's in a good public place. Don't go around their house straight away and things like that. And I think there's so much more you can assess about a person when you're face to face. So if you do that in a place, that's another safety measure as well. And obviously make sure everyone knows where you're going and who you're meeting.
And it's, I think, like when you're like dating, obviously you're putting yourself in a situation where you need to be vulnerable to connect with other human beings, but there is that, I think it's so important to be really mindful of safety and protecting yourself whilst trying to be open and vulnerable. So it's a quite a fine line to kind of walk down, isn't it? Is there like particular apps that you recommend that you feel work best?
I do I do get asked this, and I personally think there isn't an app that is perfect. I think all of them can work, all of them can be good, because I think Tinder used to be like the hookup app, but I've known quite a few people that have met their other halves on that. So I don't think there's a bad one. It's just finding the one that works for you. So I met the person I'm seeing now, I met him on Plenty of Fish. I find that quite an easy one to navigate. Lots of people are on it around where I live. I've also been on Hinge very early on, and I love that app, but there was about 4 people within 50 miles of me. So there's no point going on an app where there isn't a lot of people on it, because you want that choice, don't you? It's like if there's only 4 people on it, that does narrow your search
limits.
down.
It does limit what limits the pool, doesn't it?
Unless you're willing to travel as well, because I think that's what's quite important, is that when you're starting, to be clear on what you're looking for, whether it's a relationship or something more casual, but also all of your criteria. Like my criteria, I wanted somebody that I could travel to see. I don't want a long distance relationship. So what kind of physical boundaries are we thinking about there? How far away is it sensible to travel, and all of that kind of stuff? So I think being clear on that before you start does help you pick the right app, for want of a better word. But I do think all of them can work, because they're all essentially full of single people looking for some sort of a relationship, whether it's casual or whether it's something more long term. So so just using it like that. I like to think of the apps as like a busy bar. Like when we were younger and we used to go out to bars and meet people, it was like, just imagine that an app is a virtual bar and you're just chatting to lots of people in those first few weeks, just trying to get to know people, practicing having those conversations with people and getting to know them. And like you say, being a little bit vulnerable, revealing bits about yourself, but not like being a gushing tap of information, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So like we've had different experiences of being back in the dating pool when we weren't expecting to be. So someone sort of, how do people know when they're at that stage where they're ready to date?
This is a really common question, and I think when somebody asks me, I don't know if I'm ready to date, I think them asking that question in itself says that they're nearly ready, if not actually ready to do it. Because if you're not ready to date, you're not even thinking about it. The fact that it kind of comes into your awareness like that, and you're going to have that natural worry about getting back out there again. But usually I would say, as long as, I think there's things to think and check yourself on in terms of you're not ready to date. So I think if you're dating to feel better, and because I think sometimes when people have, particularly if you've had a breakup, but it can also happen with bereavement, is that you want to feel better and you want to feel better quickly. And so dating can be a distraction. And and that, I guess, that acknowledgement that you get from other people, and the attention can lift you a little bit initially, but I think it's quite a precarious place to date in, because you are quite vulnerable in the position that you're in. And I think that's where some of the horror stories that you hear about dating is when people are dating from that position of like, I feel terrible and I just want to feel better. So they don't generally have very good boundaries around their mental health and the people that they choose to go on dates with. So I think that to me is really important, to be in a place where dating isn't the be all and end all, but it's something that you just know that you want to try. And And ultimately, you don't know if you're ready until you do it.
Yeah.
And see how it feels. Because the first time I went on the dating apps, I was in that mindset, I'm not sure I'm ready. And I call it like I just dipped my toe in. And I went on it. I thought, right, I'm going to go on it for a month, because I think I was terrified of the technology as well. The whole idea, I'm not very tech savvy. And so going, I've got to download an app, I've got to do a profile, I've got to then choose people and have conversations. And I found it really overwhelming. And so I thought, stop, just do one step at a time. So let's pick an app. It was Hinge in the first instance, and just try it. And like I said, that didn't work out because there wasn't that many people on it local to me. But you don't know that until you do it. And so you get more information the more things that you try.
Yeah.
And I think just guiding people through that, just going, look, just do, with any issue in life, with any problem, it's like, just what's the next step? So yeah, I think it can be helpful just to do it in small steps like
yeah
that.
I mean, that is what I did. So I was in a relationship for 14 years. That when that ended, I realized that I'd kind of lost a lot of my sense of boundaries. I'd lost a lot of sense of who I was, and the idea of dating before I had a firm like standing, whatever, grounding is the word I'm looking for. Before I had a firm grounding in kind of who I was and what I was bringing to the table and what my boundaries were and what my expectations were, like I wasn't kind of ready to get out and date. When I started to think about maybe I didn't even really kind of know what it was I wanted in a partner at that stage either. And when I got to that point and I thought, well, maybe I might be interested to kind of have a bit of a peek around, I went on one of, I think it was Plenty of Fish, because that seemed to be the one that everyone used at that point. I did like a little very bare basic profile. I had no picture at all, because I didn't want to put a picture up. Because of my job as well, like I didn't really kind of want to be like that exposed, and that for me was that dipping that toe, and that I found really interesting. I almost approached it as a scientific experiment, and I found it really interesting how people were about me not having a photo and trying to get me to send personal images, and like trying to ask things that were really kind of what felt really inappropriate questions before we'd even established like a hello type of thing. So I think it is quite important, like what you're saying. I would echo that you have kind of that idea of what you want out of what you're doing on the app, and what you're okay with, and what how you're going to deal with some of the stuff that comes along with it. Because it is like you say, if you're not feeling particularly kind of positive or in a high self-esteem space, I think it can be quite a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm heterosexual, so I was looking at men, and the men I encountered, I've got to say, I didn't have any horrendous experiences, but there's definitely the men on the apps struggle as much as the women, because I do coach both, but I have more clients that are women, and the complaints that they have about men, I've had the same complaints when I've been on dates with guys.
Okay.
Same thing about the women that they've been meeting. So I think there isn't as much of a gender gap as we think. And I think the difficulty with the apps is that, as it is with the internet in general, I think, is that people can kind of hide behind things.
Yeah.
You know, even when they put photos up and things like that, they can pretend to be somebody that they're not. And I think that's the difficulty, is that you've got to have, and that's why I think apps are good as well, is that you get lots of practice at talking to lots of people, and figuring out what are some of the red flags and things like that.
Yeah.
That aren't like proper red flags, like they're a murderer or something like that, but just things that go, that doesn't sound quite right, there's something off about that. And I think, you know, you've just got to follow your gut instinct in a lot of cases, and trust that as well, because I think when you get that little pull that something's not quite right, you know, you need to either investigate it, but certainly pay attention to it. Don't
is that something that you help people with? Because I'm very aware that like a lot of my clients that I work with are in a place where they've kind of forgotten what their boundaries are. They don't know how to communicate boundaries. They've lost a lot of a sense of who they are. So don't necessarily trust their instinct that this is a red flag, or this is actually not something that I should be tolerating, and kind of trying to override that people pleasing part of their persona that is sort of says, oh no, it's fine, they didn't mean it that way. Is that something that you work with people to kind of help them recognize?
Yes, yeah. And the thing is, despite the work that I do, I still have that tendency myself, is that I am a people pleaser. I think a lot of us are.
Yeah.
But at least acknowledging that that's what you are, and then planning for that kind of thing. But I think, yes, because I know what you mean. There's people that when you've, even as a mum, even if you've not had anything traumatic happen, I think as a mum, you can lose a little bit of your identity, and you're used to being something or everything for some, for your kids and for your husband and things like that. And so I do think you can lose a little bit of, well, actually, what do I want, in this? And the boundaries thing, I like to, because boundaries, sometimes I feel like that's a hard word to explain, but just having standards. What are your standards? And like I've had instances on the apps where people have sent me, I've not had anything really rude, but I've had people sending me like things of them getting out the shower and things like that. And it was like, and it always jarred with me. It's like, I don't know you well enough or really at all for you to be sending that to me. And I sometimes think my first reaction is like, I don't know how to respond to that, is a good one to send back and just say, because it just, some people that would work for and they like that, and it's a way of flirting. But for me, it's just a step too far. So I think working with people and figuring out not what my standards are, but what theirs are. When you receive something like that, how does it feel? And if you can feel that kind of contraction or that drawing back, it's like, you don't have to respond straight away. That's one of the good things about online dating, is that there's no rule that says that you have to go back to them straight away. So I would suggest always pause when you've had a reaction like that and reflect on it. What is going on here? What would I want to say to the person if I couldn't say anything wrong?
Yeah.
And I find journaling is really helpful, because when something like that happens, you haven't got people necessarily around you to bounce ideas off. So just journaling it out and writing it all down, and it gives you a little bit of clarity in that moment, and sort of go back to them when you feel a little bit calmer and more reassured.
Yeah, because we've all got different sort of levels of what we're okay with and who we're okay with it being. And I think it is that kind of not feeling pushed into having communication that you're not comfortable with. Because for me, if I wasn't comfortable with what's going on at this stage, what's it going to be like when I actually meet them? How are they going to be respectful of like my nose if this no is not being respected at this point? So I think that's really kind of useful to reflect before you're in that situation. How might that feel, and how might I deal with it? Okay, so let's imagine. Go on.
That's something just to touch on, because I often find like somebody, let's say somebody sends a photograph of them coming out the shower or whatever, not too explicit, but they send that to you, and it's like the instinct can be to go to bolt and either block them or go back and get into an argument about it. And actually, I feel like you kind of lose an opportunity there to learn about how to handle that reaction yourself. But also you lose the opportunity to learn how that person responds to a boundary being set. And so I take it as like, so somebody comes to your house and you want them to take their shoes off. Okay, and you say you need to take your shoes off, but then you slam the door in their face because they haven't done it straight away. You've not given them an opportunity to respond. And I had some good reactions from people when I said to them, I don't know how to respond to that. It feels a bit uncomfortable that you're sending me something when I haven't met you in person. And they, in quite a lot of instances, they were a bit embarrassed that they'd overstepped the mark. If I'd just blocked them, I would never have found that out about them. And I ended up having a nice interaction with this guy around, like, I understand how hard it is to flirt via text, especially when you've not met me. But this, for me, is too intimate for this early on in the relationship. And he was lovely about it.
Yeah, but it's that communication, isn't it? That is an important part of the process. So it isn't just like there's something that's kind of in that grey area, being able to communicate around that and seeing how it goes forward, because it is quite a complex space. I think there is almost messaging of, this is how you flirt through like online dating. And I can see why it can be confusing for people to know what is okay and what is not okay, but it's going to be different for each individual, from what we're talking about, like what I would be okay with, what you'll be okay with, what my friends who are on online dating are okay with is different. I have friends who are doing online dating at the moment, and they tell me stories and I'm like, absolutely not, I would absolutely not be okay with that, absolutely not. They think it's hilarious. So it's that different kind of space, but being able to, like you say, communicate that this is, what was this about? What, this is how this was received by me. I think it does give you so many clues, doesn't it, about how communication, if you go forward into a relationship, can be, and help you strengthen your own communication skills.
That's what I was going to say, actually, is that the apps, when you're talking sort of just via the app or either via WhatsApp or something like that, it's a really great opportunity to practice setting boundaries, because in a relatively, whilst it still feels vulnerable, it's a relatively safe environment to do that in. You're not worried about the other person attacking you physically or verbally, particularly. So it feels like a good opportunity to practice that setting of boundaries, because I think when you're then doing it face to face, you already know how they've responded to you setting a boundary the first time. Do you know what I mean? And how they responded. And if they didn't respond well, you wouldn't then go and meet them, probably. They've shown you who they are.
Yeah. And that's a really important thing. If someone shows you who they are, then actually accept that is who they are. Because I think as women, we can quite often see the potential in a partner and be like, oh, but they did all these nice things, and then there's this one massive red flag, but I'm just going to ignore that because they did all of these other nice things.
They meant well.
Yeah. Oh, they didn't mean it that way. It's like, but really. So I mean, I'm wondering.
Sorry, I do think texting sometimes can be a bit clumsy. There's the typos, which I've fallen foul of myself, and some people just, that if they don't punctuate properly, you can misread something. So I always think I do give people the benefit of the doubt in those circumstances.
Yeah.
But like you say, the red flags absolutely don't ignore.
No, because I think that's where we can sometimes come unstuck. So how do we know, like we're dating and we're getting out there and we're talking to people, and I know one of the questions that you get asked a lot is, is it okay to sleep with someone on a first date, okay to sleep with someone that I'm dating, kind of where does sex come into it all?
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's a right answer for everyone, because like we've already established, everybody's a little bit different. I think for me, if you're sleeping with somebody because you think you should, i.e. you've got to a point, I've gone on 5 dates, or I've gone on, we've been seeing each other for 2 months or whatever, then I feel like I should be sleeping with them. Then no. And if you're sleeping with somebody because you think it will make them like you more, or it'll create a deeper connection than you've already got, I would think all of those things are a no-no. I think personally, sleep with somebody, whether it's the first date or in 6 months, when you want to, when it feels right to you, and if you sleep with them, I would like to think, certainly especially on a first date, or if you sleep with somebody in the first few dates, is like, how would you feel, or what would you think about yourself if they didn't call back? And if you're sleeping with somebody because you're very attracted to them and you just want to have a good time, and if they didn't call afterwards, or it fizzled out after a couple more dates, you would be okay with that, then crack on, have fun with it, be safe, obviously, but enjoy it. But don't do it. I think sometimes the things I've come across with clients is where they've slept with someone thinking it's going to change the relationship in some way and move it forward, and it doesn't in the way that they think. So yeah, that would be my main coaching of that, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, if somebody said something like, I'm not looking for a long-term relationship, believe them. Do you know what I mean? Don't think, oh yeah, but we've got this
they'll
great
change.
together, it's going to change their mind. No.
Yeah.
Sleep with them if you really fancy them and you want to have sex. Don't sleep with them thinking it's going to change something in them.
Yeah, because again, if someone's, I mean, it's hard because like I know I wasn't looking for sort of casual. I was looking for something that potentially I could, someone that there would be a connection with when I was sort of doing the dating thing. And I did experience a lot of people, men that I met were like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a relationship. And then when you ask the questions, it's like, well, not really looking for a relationship. And it's like, well, I just, like, for me, it's like, just be honest about it, because there's plenty of people that are just looking for sex, and that's okay. If you just want a sexual connection with someone, have at it. Like, for me, it's like, be honest and truthful. And what I realized is that not everyone comes from that point of view, because not everyone holds that opinion. Like, if you want to have sex, isn't it? We're all grown, fully grown people. As long as it's consensual and it's safe, to do what you want. So I think that's a really important point that you raised, that you need to have that self-care. You need to be in a space where you're okay with what might happen next, and not having the expectation that sexual currency is going to lead to a more intimate connection. Because yes, we've got all the hormones and the chemicals that can, particularly for women, that make us feel a lot more bonded when we become sexual, but that's not a given, is it?
No. And I don't buy into the idea about you can't sleep with a man too soon, because then he doesn't see you as relationship material.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because I do think there's maybe some people that think like that, but the kind of people that think like that, I wouldn't be interested in getting together with anyway. Yeah. So if they reveal themselves to be judgmental in that way, well, then they've just excluded themselves. Thank you very much, bye. So yeah. I don't, because I think that a lot, like you say, we're all grown adults here, and essentially the sleeping with somebody shouldn't mean anything other than that, I think, in the first instance. So I think if there's judgment around it on their side, or even when you judge yourself, like if you've slept with someone and then you go, oh God, I really shouldn't have done that. I think work on that part of it, because I think you've both slept with each other early on. So if you're judging yourself, you're also judging them, and vice versa. I think it makes it a difficult container to actually have fun in, doesn't it? But I think if somebody is judging you for sleeping with them too soon, that's
a big thing, isn't it? It is that kind of expectation of, I mean, I have the lock and the key analogy in my head, and I just think it's such nonsense. If there's two people having sex and one person is judging the other for it not being respectful because it's too soon, like you say, for me, that would be a massive red flag. Like, if two people are choosing to have sex together, like, you're both doing it. So if there's a judgment, it is a judgment on both. And like, if you want to wait until you're married, that's okay. Wait until you're married. If you want to have sex with someone in the first 5 minutes of meeting them, as long as it's something you both, do you know what I mean? It's like,
you both want it. Where's the issue?
And because it is a part of being an adult. If you like having sex with people, that is a part of it. Not all of us want to go out and have sex with people, so it's very, I think, like, it is that personal thing, isn't it? And being in a place of empowerment and knowing what you want from that.
Yeah, and I think that self-awareness of knowing how important sort of a physical relationship is to you, and knowing as well how you've responded in the past when you've slept with someone, because like you mentioned there about the chemicals that are released, I don't know all the scientific names, I'm afraid, but it's but like, women do tend to have that more than men, and knowing that ahead of time, you don't judge yourself when you do feel a little bit clingy after, maybe. Being aware of how you've responded in the past, and then that can reassure you a little bit. Like, this is just what happens after you've got intimate with somebody. It can feel very vulnerable and anxiety producing, can't it? And I think that for me is where the blurring of the lines between the dating and the relationship, where it's transitioning from one to the other. That's where a lot of anxiety comes up for people. So I think it's just helpful to have that awareness around how you respond, and have somebody to talk to about it, you know, like a sensible friend, even, that doesn't get in the pool with you and create lots of drama around it. They're just there to talk to about it. It's really helpful.
So how could you know, like when you're going through the dating process, meeting, you know, the one, how do you know that the person that you've met is going to work out with?
Well, as we all know, we never know.
No.
I think that's going to make everybody very anxious, like there's some magic formula. But I think you can't know everything about a person up front, can you? No. There's no guarantees, unfortunately, in life. And I know that from having lost my husband, and you know it from having a relationship end. No matter how you feel at the beginning, you can't know in that first year how it's going to pan out. And I think that's where taking care of yourself and your self-care arrangements, I think, can be really helpful, because being okay and enjoying this for what it is, without any guarantee of it lasting 50 years. And I think that it can be very worrying time. I think it can be a very anxious time, but I think learning to kind of live in the moment and not have to have any guarantees in place. Because I think regardless of what anybody says, I think at the beginning, people are like, they think you're perfect. They think you have no flaws. And we all know that's rubbish. It's like, of course I've got flaws. I'm a human being, you know, but at the beginning, there is that kind of blinkered look, them to you and you to them. You don't see the things that they've not intentionally kept hidden from you, but it just takes a while, doesn't it, for people to...
You present your best self, don't you? Because it's human nature. You do present your best self. And I think for me, it's having like the big conversations, like those, you know, uncomfortable things. I think, you know, I was quite obnoxiously me when I was dating, very much so. But because of like what I'd experienced in my previous relationship, it was really important that I could be exactly who I was and say exactly what I thought. And one of the things for me is I didn't want any more children. Now, you might have a different perspective on this, but for me, I presented that information very quickly when I met with someone new. It was probably one of the first 5 things I said, because it was important to me. Like, I didn't want any more children. So for me, that was a non-negotiable that was not going to change no matter who I met. And I felt like it's so important that the other person was aware of that, because otherwise we're wasting our time. Like, you could be the best, seem like the best match and loads of different spaces, but if you want to have biological children, I am not the one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think apps like Plenty of Fish give you that, they say that on the headlines. That's not strange. I think they, on the headlines, you go, do you smoke, do you drink, do you have children, and do you want children? They're like the massive things that there really isn't a lot of compromise on. Most people are like, I definitely wouldn't go out with a smoker, and I'm ambivalent about wanting more kids. Well, that's really helpful to know up front, isn't it? Like you say, because you don't want to invest a lot of time in somebody where those like core things are really not aligned. And I think interestingly, you said that you were like unapologetically you. I think that's fantastic. But I see that as well in some people, where it's like it's almost like testing the other person. I'm going to show you not my best self. I'm going to show you everything.
I'm absolutely aware. Absolutely aware. That was part of what went on for me in that. Without going into too much of like the stuff that that I experienced before, it was really important that someone could see my not best self and be okay with that, and share their not best self with me.
Yeah, I think that's lovely though, because I think it gives it a bit of permission to, like you say, reveal the messy side of stuff too, because I think it's not intentional when you don't reveal stuff about you, but these things can just take a little bit of time for you to open up and feel comfortable sharing all of that. And I think when somebody else shares something vulnerable, it kind of gives you permission. It kind of helps you relax a little bit and go, oh, right, okay, we can be ourselves a little bit more. And I love that. Because you can't do that with everyone. That doesn't make somebody a bad match or otherwise. No. It's just, it's that it's a bit of a dance at the beginning in terms of you take a step and I take a step, and I think it's important when you're dating that you notice what the other person's revealing as well, that it's not all one-sided. So that you don't take 10 steps and they don't take anything. It's like you do one, they do one, you know, and it is a bit of a dance.
I found it a really kind of interesting evolutionary process, and sort of, I mean, I very much did, like I said, approached it as kind of like an experiment, and did kind of sort of, you know, see, because of the work I do as well, reflected on, you know, what came up for me in this, and what was I okay with this in this experience, and what was I not okay? What did I particularly enjoy about that person? Even if the date wasn't a great date, or that person wasn't someone that I wanted to see again, what did I enjoy about them? What did I not enjoy about them? And very much I created lists, and I'm not a list person, because it just felt really important to get a grounding in what was important to me, and what not only what did I want from a partner, but what was I bringing to a relationship. And it really was like, there was times of healing for me from my previous relationship, and kind of revelation. The first time that someone told me that I had a good sense of humor, like that I was funny, really impacted on me, because it was something that I'd forgotten about myself through prior stuff. So yeah, I think I found it such an interesting process to go through, and I think having somebody alongside you when you're going through that process can be so powerful.
Yeah, and I think as well it can stop you going down rabbit holes, where, because I think whenever you are dating, you are going to get knockbacks occasionally and stuff like that. And I think my biggest thing is teaching people how to not take things personally, because when you do that, it kind of makes you hide. It kind of creates a bit of shame, and then I think that's when a lot of people they go on the apps, they binge on dating, and then they come off again because something awful happens, and that flip-flopping between the two is what creates that kind of emotional roller coaster that is not fun with dating, and it makes it less likely that you're going to meet somebody, because you're always on and off.
And I think that's a really key word that you use there, fun. Like, surely it should be fun. It should be an enjoyable experience. I know that there is elements of it that I found completely really frustrating, but overall, if you're looking to meet somebody that you want to spend time with, there should be some fun involved in that.
Yeah, and I think people whenever I've used that word, I can feel that they shrink back a little bit, because it's like, this doesn't feel fun. This is just something I've got to do if I want a relationship. And it's like, but to me, I think, take away the fact that you're looking for probably a life partner. It's just meeting another human being. And how important is the chemistry and the physical side of a relationship, the sense of humor, what they do for a living, what their dreams are, what do they want to do in retirement, have they got kids, and what are they like? Do you know what I mean? It's so complex that putting that pressure on this one person that sat in front of you are you my life partner? It's like, we're just having a drink, or we're going for a walk, and we're getting to know each other. And I think if you like people, I'm not very good in big groups. I find it a bit overwhelming. I would say I'm probably an introvert, but I love one-to-one conversations like this. And so I think because of that, I've never had a bad date. I've had lots of dates where I haven't fancied the other person, or there hasn't been kind of chemistry, but I've never had a bad date, because I've always gone away having met somebody who's quite different from me and enjoyed getting to know them a little bit. So I think that if you can take the pressure off it being about marriage and babies and all of that kind of stuff, or maybe not even marriage, maybe just finding a companion for the rest of your life, I think if you take that away, and it just be about meeting the person in front of you, and if once you've done it a few times, you think it can be fun. That process of just meeting people and having a chat can be quite cathartic, I think. By the time you're dating, like I'm 45 now, everybody's had some quite interesting lives. So when I'm dating at 20, nobody's that interesting. When you're at our age, we've all got a few knocks to us, haven't we? And it's just interesting where everybody's lives have led them. So yeah, I love it. I actually quite enjoy the dating process.
Yeah.
And I love helping people through it as well, because I do think it's quite challenging. But I think some of the strategies that you do around dating as well, when you were dating, did you have lots of conversations with lots of people at once? Or
I did, yeah. I spoke to quite a few people. I don't like going out for meals. Like going out for a dinner date is like my worst nightmare. So I almost did like what I called pre-dates. So I would chat to people. I didn't really like talking to people for a long time. All of my people don't know all of this, but hey, anyone who knows me, you don't know me. So I actually had a dedicated phone number because my actual phone number I could be found because of my work, because I'd used it for my work. And so I was really aware that if you put that phone number into Google, you could find where I lived, and I was not okay with that. So I had a separate phone number, and I would go out and just like go and meet up for a non-alcoholic drink, and just to sort of check the vibe of a person, because I'm dyslexic, so I don't particularly enjoy typing conversations anyway. And I just kind of wanted to get a sense of a person before I spoke to them more. So I did. I spoke to lots of people. I was really, when I decided I was ready to date, I was really open to dating. So I was doing a coconut shy, and somebody asked for my number, and I exchanged numbers. I very much kind of, just kind of got out there and was interested to meet people, and a lot of it was to kind of work out what did I want. What do I even want out of this?
Yeah, because I think sometimes people can feel a bit like, I've got to have all of this information before I even start, which you want to have thought about it, but clarity comes from action, not from sitting there journaling and thinking about stuff in the background. And I love the fact that you said that about having a separate phone line. That's very smart, I guess. But because what I found is sometimes when I would go on a date, people had like Facebook stalked me and found that I did relationship coaching and dating coaching, and then either freaked out or they binged watched everything I'd ever done.
Oh yeah.
And then I came to the date feeling a bit like they've already seen so much of me.
Yeah, and a different side of you as well. It's your professional side, isn't it?
It was, but a part of me was like, well, they're going to have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever, like on something like this or on a Facebook Live or something, I'm never going to go into like, this is the person I've gone out with and this was what happened. I would only ever share my side of personal experiences, nothing identifiable of them. But it just felt a little bit strange to have. And I guess that's what happens sometimes when with Facebook and things like that, is that you can kind of go down.
I mean for me it was sort of how long have I been my husband now? 9 years, so it's like 9-10 years ago. So sort of technology's moved on even more since then. So I kind of feel like lucky that it wasn't as accessible, and I didn't do podcasts and things like that. But yeah, I think like the biggest thing is it's just kind of getting it out there, isn't it? When you're ready and you feel kind of confident in yourself and you're doing it for all the right reasons, it's get out there, isn't it? And kind of be open to what's going to come your way.
Yeah, and also I think when people have done that bit of work on like healing themselves, so that not everything, you can kind of take a step back and not everything is about you, because like people, like let's say men, for instance, when you're on a dating app, it's like men say things and do things and it's not necessarily about you, it's about what their experience has been. And I think if you can kind of lean back and be accepting of the fact that everybody's got a bit of baggage and they've had experiences that are influencing how they're responding to you, and therefore it's not necessarily personal to you, because at that stage people don't know you very well. But I think even being aware of that, it can be easy to take things personally, and that's like a massive thing of learning that it isn't all about you.
No, and it isn't, and that's the thing, isn't it? It isn't all about you, because for most part they don't even know you yet. So like I went through, like I had rejection, I had people stand me up, and I kind of I just took my laptop with me and did some work. But I was quite brutal. Like, if you just stood me up, and then I would get a message saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I flaked for all of these reasons. I can I have another date?" It's like, no, because tonight me that wasn't okay. Like, if you're not going to turn up, like, my time is valuable, and if you can't, you can message me now. If you couldn't message me to say I can't arrive for whatever reason, that isn't off the table for me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
And I think a big one actually was that I see a lot of people where it's like, when you don't make solid plans, it's like something that you put in going, I'll see you on Sunday, with the view to, right, I'm going to get back in touch later in the week and we'll sort out where we're going to meet and what time.
Yeah.
And then nothing happens. I think that's a big one that can happen. And it's like, if they forget about Sunday in this early stage when it should be quite exciting and to get to meet someone, like you say, it's like, yeah, you're not for me if that's the case. I mean, if they actually stand you up when you've made solid plans, that's
yeah.
Unless something catastrophic happen,
Yeah.
But I think generally, I think and one good tip actually I had is that every date I've been on, I've thought, right, I think anticipating that this might happen, is that, can I enjoy this on my own? Like, if this person doesn't turn up, can I still enjoy it? And I've had like I was meeting up with somebody for a walk, and I took my swimming gear with me. I love outdoor swimming. So I had my swimming gear in the boot of the car just in case he didn't show up. So it's just because I was traveling quite a way to meet up for this walk. So it's like, I'm not going to travel for an hour and then just have to travel all the way home again. So it's thinking in a way that I'm going to have fun no matter what, and literally no matter what, even if they don't turn up. I'm going to go out for lunch with myself. I'm going to have a swim. I'm going to go to the cinema or something like that. Those are all things that I would do on my own.
Doesn't that just shift the energy from like feeling rejected or feeling like in some way that there's something wrong with you to like, well, I can have fun, whatever. And you're taking yourself on a date, and sometimes that's more fun.
Yeah, and I think as well, because I've heard this from guys as well, that quite often if somebody stands you up, that not taking it personally, because there's stuff going on in their life, and a lot of the time, like anxiety stuff, where people, they want to date and they want the relationship, but this dating bit they find so worrying, and like they can't actually, they either, I'm not saying they necessarily they could even make yourself ill from like worrying about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it happens. It's stress, isn't it? It is that stress and that anxiety. I mean, I think it's just as difficult for both sexes, isn't it? And like, not turning up doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't want to turn up, but
so I always have I try and have a little bit of empathy for the person on the other end, thinking, option A, they could be an absolute troll and they deserve all the venom. Or B, they could be somebody that's really delicate and anxious and it was just too much for them. And so I like to think, which one, I don't want to assume either one.
No.
I don't want to assume the worst of people, because I think that puts you in a bad energy as well. So having as much sympathy for somebody until they prove you otherwise.
I think, and that's the point, isn't it? It's kind of, you can, or my experience, I felt you could kind of get the vibe of the person that was juggling the 3 or 4 different dates on the same day and then picked which one they were going to. The person that, genuinely something happened and they couldn't come. The communication, I think, is different. I'm really nerdy about words and communication, and I would notice patterns of communication from types of I don't know how to word it. There would be certain ways. So like this, like I've read the dating books that some of the men are told to read, like about the negging and all of that lot, and I found that really interesting information to have in my arsenal to recognize when it was being used in communication with me, but because I like NLP and all of that sort of stuff, so I found that a really interesting way to kind of filter some of the stuff. So yes, absolutely, having empathy, having an open mind, having an open heart, but there was that part of me that's like, okay, that's not for me. That's not for me. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is sort of knowing, like, when it comes back into self-care and your boundaries, it's like, it's okay if it's not for you. You don't have to be horrible to somebody about it, but just express that, you know, for me, this isn't the thing. So thank you very much for your time, and allow people to move on nicely. And I'm noticing that we are really over time, and I know that there's so many other things that, like, I would love to talk about, like the ghosting and the zombieing and all of the, you know, little things that come along.
They're so dramatic, aren't they?
Yeah, it does. But, you know, it's from my friends that are currently dating, it's stuff that I know that they're experiencing, and you know, there's got to be ways of working with it. But I guess if anybody's listening and they're experiencing those things, your details will be in the show notes, and they can get in touch with you and come and find you on your Facebook and get engaged with you. Not engaged in that way. get in touch with you about what they want to talk about. So we are at end of time. Is there anything you want to leave people listening with?
Yes. One thing I would love to say is that when we don't have all of the information in a situation, it's like being aware that you don't have all the information and choose the option that makes you feel less bad. Because I think often when we don't have all the information, we assume the worst. We assume that they didn't like us, they stood us up on purpose. And I would say that could be true, but it could also be true that the car's broken down, or they had an anxiety attack and literally couldn't come. And I think whichever one makes you feel less bad, choose that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me today, Jenny.
It's been lovely meeting you.
Oh, yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you to those that are listening. I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. I love hearing your feedback and suggestions. And if you want to find out more about me and my guest, visit srtt.co.uk. Follow SRTT Podcast on social media. I'll be back next Wednesday with a new guest. Until then, stay curious and be kind to yourself.